I did my presentation on Kirk Bloodsworth, who was the first person in America to be exonerated post-conviction on the basis of DNA evidence. On July 24, 1984, 9-year-old Dawn Hamilton was visiting a family friend's house to play with her friend Lisa Helmick while her father was at work. While playing hide-and-seek outside, Dawn searched for Lisa by a nearby pond where she ran into a man who would later turn out to be Kimberly Ruffner, a man who had been released from prison days before for the sexual assault of another young girl. He told Dawn he would help her find her friend and led her deeper into the woods. When Dawn did not return to the house, Lisa's mother, Eleanor Helmick, went to look for her and eventually called the police when she couldn't find her. 2 hours after the police were called, her body was discovered in a wooded area near the Fontana Village apartments where the Helmick family lived. She was found lying face down in the dirt, wearing a yellow pullover shirt and white cotton socks. Her shorts and underwear were found hanging on a tree branch nearby. Her skull had been crushed with a rock, and an imprint of a shoe was found on her throat. An autopsy confirmed that Dawn suffered from blunt force trauma to the head as well as evidence of strangulation. There was also signs of sexual assault. The evidence that was left behind were shorts and underwear belonging to Dawn, footprints in the dirt, a rock by Dawn's head with blood on it, bruises shaped like shoe prints on her neck, and semen found on the victim as well as on her underwear. Kirk Bloodsworth was a former Marine who lived in Maryland, where he worked harvesting shellfish and fish. In August of 1984, police arrested and charged Kirk with the rape and murder of Dawn Hamilton based on an anonymous call telling the police that they had seen him with the victim on the day of the murder. He was 23 at the time of his arrest. A police sketch was publicized on television and in newspapers, which caused an anonymous caller who was rumored to be one of Kirk's neighbors to identify Kirk as the man in the sketch. Looking at the sketch and at a picture of Kirk at the time, there are similarities, but the description of the suspect was a slim 6'5" white male with blonde hair and a bushy mustache. Kirk was 6 feet tall, with red hair, and weighed about 200 pounds at the time of his arrest. There was no physical evidence to tie him to the crime, but at the trial, 5 witnesses testified that they had seen him with the victim, even though 2 of the witnesses had not been able to pick him out of a lineup. The prosecutors had little evidence against Kirk other than the testimonies, but Kirk did mention the bloody rock found at the scene of the crime during a conversation with the police. It was found later that the police had shown him the rock previously during his interrogation. The defense presented several witnesses stating that Kirk had been in Baltimore at the time of the murder, but the jury disregarded this and sentenced him to death on March 8, 1985. While on death row in the early 90s, Kirk was doing some research and learned about DNA testing that could potentially eliminate him as a suspect and prove his innocence. He contacted his lawyer, who ended up paying for the test to be done with his own money, but first they needed the DNA from the crime scene. The evidence was initially thought to have been destroyed. However, it was later found in a paper bag on the floor of a closet in the judge's chambers. Tests that were done on the semen found on the underwear proved that it did not match Kirk's DNA. In 1993, after 9 years, Kirk Bloodsworth was released from prison but not formally exonerated. In 2003, DNA from another prisoner, Kimberly Ruffner, who I mentioned earlier, was added to state and federal databases for an unrelated burglary and attempted rape. This DNA turned out to be a match to the DNA found at the crime scene. Ruffner pleaded guilty in 2004, which led to the full exoneration of Kirk Bloodsworth, the first American sentenced to death to be exonerated post-conviction by DNA testing. Soon after his exoneration, Kirk began fighting for those who had also been wrongfully convicted. He was an active volunteer speaker at events and is currently a professional advocate. He wrote and published a book about his experience titled Bloodsworth, and began working as the advocacy director for Witness to Innocence, a Philadelphia-based coalition of death row exonerees who worked to end capital punishment. In my opinion, Kirk Bloodsworth was wrongfully convicted due to the police not bothering to get accurate testimonials from witnesses. Like we learned in the first few weeks of class, witness testimonies are not always accurate, and when some of the witnesses were asked to choose a suspect out of a lineup, 2 out of 5 were not able to single Kirk out. Those who had picked him out had seen him previously from the sketch by watching the news. The sketch does somewhat resemble Kirk, so they were able to recognize his features. The jury also disregarded witnesses who provided an alibi for Kirk, which led to his sentencing. I don't think this was fair, and I believe that this shouldn't have happened in the first place. At the time of the murder, DNA testing and analysis wasn't used to solve crimes, so I'm not sure if this would happen today, but I believe that there should have been more done to find out who really did it instead of relying solely on witness testimony.